And church, that's the very essence of pride, isn't it? To exalt one's own name, to exalt one's own purpose, one's own plan. So they're attempting to establish something permanent, a city where power is centralized, culture is formed, and civilization, their civilization could grow, but not in the civilization and what God told them, in the civilization that's made in their own image. And so it's more than just building buildings and creating sidewalks and creating streets, places of entertainment. It's deeper than that. This was an attempt to establish a civilization that could be centered around them. Every brick that you lay down becomes a monument to human pride. You see, that has no place in God's kingdom, because it's a rebellion against the very throne of heaven itself. Instead of growing closer to God, it places you on a collision course with God, whose glory he will not share. So really, there's the danger of building this city, the danger of allowing this ambition and this pride to continue to grow would be, one, a godless city. And I know I'm going to jump forward here, but for us as history, who remembers one of the most vicious, horrible, godless cities that God himself had to judge and smite and destroy? Sodom and Gomorrah is your godless city. Mesopotamia, these towers, these civilizations, these nations, these groups that would build these ziggurats, and they were these massive, incredible buildings, by the way, incredible structures, especially for their time. Incredible feat on how they, in deep ingenuity, how they built these things. And these towers, they'd be made of this same exact material. Matter of fact, you could actually visit some of those ziggurats today. They're still there. That tar that they use, that the way they harden that brick, it still stands today. There's some that are still really intact 4,000 years later. And these towers, they were so grandiose, they were so beautiful, so massive. You could be miles away, and there they are. There's Babylon. There's the city. We're on our way. And you see, and this city this tower would be surrounded by this city. And some civilizations would use this tower in their particular case. They wanted to exalt their own name. But some of the cities, they'd go and they'd have this flat top. They'd have these steps, right? And these steps would work their way around. It's incredible design. And as you work your way up, at the top, it'd be flat. These are massive structures, massive buildings. And at the top, depending what nation you were or who your God was that you were worshiping, it'd be a flat top, and they'd construct these monuments, these massive monuments, so they could worship their own gods. And up there, they'd offer sacrifice, or they'd offer incense. And this incense, the higher this tower will go, well, more the incense will reach the God of their choice and of their liking. And you would see these buildings be constructed as civilization continued to grow. These structures would be constructed. You read in the Bible, you guys worship your gods on those high places. These are these high places, church. One of the high places. Another one would be on top of mountains as well. But it would be these incredible, incredible buildings. And at the top, depending, again, on the God that you worshiped, what would be up there. But it wasn't a proper worship of Yahweh. It wasn't a proper worship of God. And so we see them actively resisting God's command, actively rebelling against God's command. And instead of trusting God, this is the sad part here. Instead of trusting God to establish their place in the world, remember, these people are trying to establish their own name in their own world, their own laws, their own way. And instead of trusting God and establishing this for them, they set out to make a name for themselves apart from God. Apart from God. Every brick they laid, every single brick they molded and they burned and they laid and they put together was an act of self-exaltation. A monument to human pride. Church, don't raise your eyebrows at them, please. Because I'm going to ask you the same question. It's easy to look at these folks, to read this story and say, man, look at these guys. What's the principles of the story? You may not build a ziggurat today, but what tower are you building? What tower have you laid out? What foundation have you laid out? It's a little painful then now, right? When we point it right back at us. What project have you set out to? Or in the past that you did, and by the grace of God, you realized like, hey, this does not exalt the Lord, and you walked away from it. Think about that. What are you trying to raise to heaven apart from God? For your own self. Because I'm going to tell you the very same thing that we see with this civilization, church, is the same thing with us, that every single tower, every single prideful ambition that we do on our own accord apart from God will come to ruin. It will come to ruin. It doesn't matter what it is. And the dangerous part is if you mask it with, well, I'm glorifying God this way, we got to be real with ourselves. God's going to be real with you. He's about to get real with them. This monument, this tower, if we're not careful, that we too can construct in our own image for our own purpose, to exalt our own names. I could assure you one thing, church, it will come crumbling down. It will. And so whether you're almost at the top and you built it, or you just laid the foundation of that tower, or you've been thinking about building that tower, really do some soul search and have it come to Jesus and ask yourself, does this really exalt and glorify God? And if it doesn't, walk away from the project. Walk away from it completely. Doesn't matter how much money you have involved in it. Doesn't matter how much effort. Doesn't wonder how much sweat on your brow you have going on for it. You will sweat till the day you die. And it will be worthless if it's not for God. It'll be worthless. Read verse 5 with me, please. It says that the Lord came down to see the city and the tower which the sons of men had built. The Lord said, I'm going to leave it there for a second, please. I talked earlier that this is a literary chiasm here when you read it. Please, when you get home, don't just take my word for it. Go home and write it down. Go from verses 1 through 9 and just put them in order. Put an A, B, C, D, E, and you'll see right in the middle. Verse 5 is the central point. This is the climax of this story. It's the climax. Don't get caught up with the whole concept of the tower. The tower is incredibly important because that's where we can find and see some principles from there that we can avoid doing in our lives. And we can see what caused this, why the Lord came down and why the Lord would judge. But this is the central message of this. The central movement of the story. This is the pivot which the entire structure of this passage is, or part of this passage entirely structured around. Is the only one. He is the one who establishes purpose. God alone is the one who establishes names. God alone is the one who establishes eternal significance. That's not something that we can reconcile or come to terms on our own. It's not something that we can build. It's not something that we can work for. These are things that are given by grace through faith. Find yourselves in that situation that you've built a tower or working on a tower, maybe on your 9th tower. Maybe you're a grand architect and you're on your 9th tower. I'm not judging. Listen, I'm just a messenger. I'm not judging you. Listen, I built my own towers, just like you guys. But at some point, you have to decide what happens when pride meets correction. When God confronts you, He tells you what you're doing is not good. What you're doing doesn't glorify me. At that moment, is your heart going to harden?